Now, to discuss this further, we're joined by political analyst Jason Unruhe, who is joining us right now. Thank you very much, Mr. Unruhe, once again for being a guest on Press TV's World News. Now, we received some live images from Warsaw. We do know that summit is actually being held there with 80 countries that were invited. We do know, of course, that Russia and China and the EU foreign policy chief did not attend this conference. Other delegations did not send high-ranking people to this summit. So, Mr. Unruhe, basically, what is your analysis of this conference that is currently being held in Warsaw?
I think that most of the world sees this conference as really just a flexing of United States power. They don't particularly believe that there's really a need for any kind of organization or to discuss tactics or the validity of the NATO group. I think everybody basically understands that this is about placing pressure on Russia and China and other conflicting powers within the region. This is just letting everybody know that despite the past rhetoric of Donald Trump, NATO is here to stay. It's here to continue to be a message of U.S. power inside of the region. There's no doubt that what's been going on very recently with the hostilities towards Russia, China, etc., as the U.S. empire is beginning to decline. This is seen in recent military failures, as well as a great deal of political instability at home, as well as a loosening of control of many spheres of influence inside the Middle East. This is the United States, or perhaps more particularly Donald Trump, letting the world know that NATO is still here and is still willing to carry out acts of force against its neighbors. This is just the U.S. sending a direct message.
So, Mr. Unruhe, what do you make of the presence of the Israeli Prime Minister in this conference? And, of course, a tweet that was sent by his office, was posted by his office, saying that they will use this opportunity to form an alliance with Arab countries to wage war against Iran.
It's very interesting that NATO, which does not include Israel, had Israel at the actual meeting. I think that's also very significant as well. I think this is the United States way of saying that Israel should be included in this alliance, even though it technically really doesn't have to include Israel at all. If we believe the original intention of NATO, which was to combat the Soviet Union, then we understand that NATO is now defunct. However, it is still a vessel for the United States to enforce its foreign policy and spheres of influence. And one of those very important spheres of influence is Israel itself, which has been a very key ally in the Middle East in undermining anybody who would oppose or simply not wish to be a part of U.S. foreign policy. This is a very clear message that since Israel is not actually a member of NATO, they've been brought into it, that there is a very strong and strategic alliance between the U.S., the NATO countries, and Israel for the explicit purpose of carrying out their interests inside the Middle East. Now, this definitely shows that there is an alliance between the U.S. and the Zionist state, and the Zionist state does intend to go along with the U.S. along its foreign policy as very strong partners. So I think the fact that they brought them there to be a part of it definitely shows that. And it's interesting to note Netanyahu's particular wording, war with Iran, and then later he attempted to wash it away as saying conflict instead, when it's very clear he did use the word war, because that's exactly what he intended. That's what this is all about, is trying to rein in Iran as a country that charts its own path and assists others in doing the same, resisting the Zionist U.S. Alliance inside the Middle East. So I think that rhetoric, slip of the tongue or not, it was at least a very honest message coming from Netanyahu that was really his intentions for being there and Israel's intention for being there as well, to mention that Iran is also a target of NATO, even though Iran is nowhere near the North Atlantic. But we do understand that the NATO, since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, that they will continue to be a force to basically carry out U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East region as well.
Mr. Unruhe, it was interesting to know that this whole idea was Brian Cook's idea, who is a special advisor on Iran to Mike Pompeo. And also we're expecting Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to make a very rare appearance in a very rare speech. We've really never heard Jared Kushner speak before. What are we expecting them to have to say?
Well, I think that the standard U.S. political line is probably going to come out of the former. It's a very run-of-the-mill, very straight. If you oppose the U.S., you're the bad guy. If you're not with us, you're against it. Kind of standard line. I think that it's very interesting that Kushner, who has basically no experience in these kind of things whatsoever, is being put in this kind of position, that he's being sent to go talk. I think it's very interesting that Trump would not just choose someone who has no experience, but someone who's also a member of his family that is Jewish. And while this seems very strange, I think he's sending a very clear message to the Zionist state that he's in line with them, that he is definitely with them, if he's going to send someone. If he had sent someone who was very educated in this area, had a lot of experience, who was also Jewish, then we wouldn't think much of it. But to send someone who has no experience in this area, who does happen to be Jewish, it seems to send it has a little bit of a different context to it. I think that this almost maybe even be pandering on their part, or perhaps Trump himself just doesn't wish to go or wants to give his son-in-law more experience. It's hard to say. But given the facts on the ground, given the choice and the important points within that choice, I think it's definitely sending a message to Israel.
Thank you very much, Jason Unruhe, joining us live from Ontario, political analyst, with, of course, his analysis of the summit that is currently underway in Warsaw, an anti-Iran summit, which is, of course, dubbed Peace and Security in the Middle East. We have some key countries that are missing from this meeting, including Russia and China, and the EU Foreign Policy Chief, which is not attending this meeting.